The cafe was busy that morning, sunlight streaming through the tall glass windows, painting golden patterns on the polished wooden floor. The smell of freshly baked bread mixed with the rich aroma of coffee, drawing people from the street like a gentle magnet. It was a place where regulars came not just for the drinks and food but for the calm and warmth that seemed to settle in the air. Among the staff, there was one waitress who stood out quietly, not because she wanted attention, but because she had a way of making people feel noticed. She moved through the cafe with practiced ease, balancing trays full of steaming cups, smiling at customers, remembering who liked extra sugar or who preferred their coffee black, and doing it all without a hint of complaint. She had that rare quality of working hard while still making it look effortless. On that particular morning, the cafe door opened with a soft chime, and a man walked in who seemed to bring a different energy with him. He was dressed in a suit that looked expensive, tailored perfectly, with polished shoes that reflected the morning sun. He moved with confidence, a kind of quiet authority that made people glance in his direction. He wasn't loud or rude. He didn't need to be. The presence he carried said enough. He had a face that people might describe as striking, sharp features and an expression that rarely revealed too much. But today, as he glanced around the cafe, there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. He noticed the waitress almost immediately, not in a casual way, but as if he had been looking for something without even knowing what it was. She noticed him too, of course, but only briefly. She had learned long ago not to assume that attention always mattered. Some people came into her life for a moment and left. Some only observed. She greeted him politely as he approached the counter, and he returned her smile with a small nod. He ordered a coffee, black, and a pastry, keeping his tone calm and deliberate. She prepared his order efficiently, placing it on the tray, then looking up with the same gentle patience she offered every customer. As he sat at a table near the window, he kept his eyes on her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her notice a sharp intelligence behind those calm eyes. It was unusual, she thought. Most people in fancy suits either ignored her or assumed she existed only to serve them. This man seemed different. He watched without judgment, almost as if he were studying her, and yet there was no malice in it. There was just curiosity. She went about her work, moving from table to table, serving drinks, wiping counters and smiling at small talk, but she felt the occasional glance from him like a subtle ripple across the quiet morning. After a while, he stood up, walking toward her table. There was no hesitation in his step, and when he reached her, he spoke in a calm but confident voice. "I have a puzzle," he said. "I like to challenge people with it from time to time. Would you like to try?" She blinked in surprise. Most people didn't challenge her with puzzles. Most people just expected her to work silently, to smile, and to answer questions about the menu. But there was something about the way he asked, a kind of respectful curiosity rather than arrogance. She nodded politely. "Of course," she said. "I like puzzles." He smiled faintly, a hint of amusement touching his eyes. He placed a small piece of paper on the counter, sliding it toward her. "This is one I have carried for years. The simple if you think carefully, tricky if you rush. I'm curious to see how quickly you solve it." She picked up the paper and glanced at the puzzle. It was clever, the kind that made your brain pause for a moment, the kind that made you imagine different possibilities before answering. She studied it carefully, leaning slightly forward, her mind quietly racing. Around them, the cafe carried on its usual rhythm. Cups clinking, soft conversations, the occasional laugh. But for that small bubble of time, it felt like the world had slowed down. The millionaire watched her, expecting a thoughtful pause, maybe even a hesitant shake of the head. He had seen people struggle with this puzzle before, some taking minutes, some failing entirely. But there was something in her expression that caught him off guard. She wasn't panicking or guessing. She was thinking quietly with focus. That calm determination was rare, and it intrigued him more than he expected. In airy places, minutes passed, or maybe only seconds, it was hard to tell. The cafe buzzed with the usual morning energy, but in the small space where they were, time seemed to compress. She didn't speak, didn't ask for hints, just looked at the puzzle, turning it over in her mind in a way that seemed effortless. He felt a strange tension build up, the kind that comes from anticipation. He had issued challenges before, but rarely had he seen someone approach them with such quiet confidence. Finally, she looked up at him, a small smile playing on her lips. The answer is... She paused just enough to draw his attention fully. This, she explained clearly and calmly how she had solved it, step by step, without hesitation, without second-guessing herself. For a moment, the millionaire froze. The answer was correct, precise, and she had solved it faster than anyone he had ever seen attempt this puzzle. His eyes widened slightly, a flush of surprise crossing his usually composed face. He had expected hesitation, maybe even failure, but certainly not this effortless mastery. Around the cafe, people who had noticed the interaction murmured quietly, sensing something unusual but not knowing exactly what. The waitress simply placed the paper back on the counter, still smiling, still composed. She had done what she had done without fanfare, without seeking recognition. For her, it had been a challenge, a test of focus, not a performance. But the impact it had on him was immediate and undeniable. He leaned back slightly, processing what had just happened. In that instant, he realized that there was more to her than met the eye. He had thought of her as just another waitress, another person going about her daily life. But now he saw intelligence, calm confidence, and quick thinking all wrapped into someone who worked quietly and efficiently every day. It was a combination he hadn't expected and didn't encounter often in his world. A world filled with people who either flattered him or feared him. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "I didn't expect that," he said honestly, a rare admission of surprise. "Most people take much longer, some can't solve it at all. You solved it before I even finished explaining it." She shrugged lightly, modestly, almost brushing off the compliment. "I just thought about it carefully," she said. "Sometimes the answer is simpler than you expect." There was a pause, a moment of quiet between them, where both of them seemed to consider each other differently. He looked at her not as a waitress, not as someone serving him coffee, but as a person with intellect, with skill, with presence. She looked at him not as a millionaire, not as someone powerful, but as a person curious and willing to see beyond appearances. The cafe continued its rhythm, unaware of the small, extraordinary moment that had just occurred. She returned to her work, moving to other tables, smiling at customers, serving drinks, and taking orders. He remained seated, reflecting on the encounter. There was a new kind of respect there, a spark of curiosity that hadn't been there before. He realized that this simple puzzle, which he had used for amusement countless times, had unexpectedly introduced him to someone remarkable. And for her, the moment was quietly significant too, though she didn't show it outwardly. She had solved a puzzle, yes, but she had also proven something to herself more than anyone, that her intelligence and abilities mattered, even in a world that often overlooked people like her. It was a small victory, but it carried weight, and in that moment, neither of them could have predicted how significant this encounter would become. As she moved back to the counter to refill coffee cups, she noticed him watching again, though this time it was different. There was no pretense, no expectation, just genuine interest. It was rare for someone in his world to notice her as a person rather than as a server, and it left a mark. She returned his glance with a polite nod, acknowledging the unspoken connection without needing words. And so the morning carried on, the cafe full of chatter, the aroma of coffee thick in the air, the sunlight warm on the floor. But in that corner, between a millionaire and a simple, hard-working waitress, something unusual had happened. A puzzle had been solved, but more than that, a bridge had been formed. One that neither of them fully understood yet. One that promised that life sometimes brings the most extraordinary encounters in the most ordinary pleaser. The cafe continued its lively rhythm as the morning moved forward. The sound of steaming milk, clinking cups, and soft chatter filled the air. But at one table near the window, time seemed to slow down for the two people who had shared that quiet, extraordinary moment. The millionaire, who had spent much of his life surrounded by people who flattered him or feared him, now felt something entirely unfamiliar. He was genuinely curious. The way the waitress had solved his puzzle so quickly, so effortlessly, had caught him off guard. He had expected a challenge for himself, a fleeting amusement, but instead, he had encountered something real. Intelligence, clarity, and calmness wrapped into one person who had not even realized the impact she had made. He sipped his coffee slowly, letting the warmth fill him as he studied her across the room. She moved efficiently, gracefully, serving other customers. But there was a quiet focus in her movements that spoke volumes. He found himself noticing small details. The way her fingers lingered on the tray just long enough to steady it. The subtle attentiveness to every gesture of the people she served. The gentle way she remembered what each person liked. It was remarkable. Not just her skill at the job, but her patience, her kindness, her ability to manage everything without letting it show any strain. He realized that intelligence came in many forms. He had assumed he was testing her with a puzzle, but perhaps unknowingly, she had been testing him as well. After a moment, he decided he wanted to extend the challenge. The puzzle had been solved, yes, but there was more he wanted to see. It wasn't about proving something to her or himself anymore. It was about understanding her mind, her way of thinking, and perhaps her character. He stood and walked toward the counter where she had returned to organize cups and utensils, moving with the quiet confidence of someone used to being noticed but not needing attention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I hope I am not disturbing you, but I would like to offer you another puzzle, a bit more challenging this time. Would you like to try?" She looked up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. There was no surprise on her face, only curiosity and a polite nod. "I like challenges," she said simply, her voice steady, unshaken. He smiled, the kind of small, appreciative smile reserved for moments when someone exceeded expectations in ways they hadn't anticipated. He placed another paper on the counter, sliding it gently toward her. "This is one I've been carrying for a long time. Most people cannot solve it at all, or they take far longer than I expect. I'm curious to see how quickly you can figure it out." Her eyes scanned the paper, taking in the details without rushing. She leaned slightly forward, tilting her head, thinking carefully. Around them, the cafe carried on as usual, but it felt as though the room had shrunk, leaving only the two of them in a space where focus and curiosity reigned. He watched her silently, noticing the way her brow slightly furrowed, the way her lips pursed in concentration, the way her hands rested lightly on the counter as if waiting for inspiration to arrive. This time, the puzzle was more complicated, designed to challenge reasoning, logic, and patience all at once. He had seen people stare at it, frustrated and anxious, some even giving up and walking away. But she approached it differently. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She examined it carefully, considering possibilities, weighing options, and quietly thinking through the steps. It was clear to him that this was more than just intelligence. It was patience, discipline, and focus. The millionaire leaned slightly on the counter, genuinely intrigued. He had never seen anyone approach a challenge like this with such calm determination. Normally, people either tried to bluff their way through or overthought everything until they missed the obvious. But she was different. He felt a strange sense of anticipation, an unusual excitement for someone who had spent most of his life surrounded by money, power, and privilege. This was not about status or wealth. This was about mind, character, and presence. Other patrons of the cafe noticed the quiet intensity but didn't understand it. They saw a well-dressed man watching a waitress, papers on the counter, and an exchange of polite words, but the weight of the moment was invisible to them. It was in the way she concentrated, the way he observed, the way the space between them held a tension that was neither threatening nor aggressive, only compelling. Minutes seemed to stretch. The waitress moved her pencil slowly across the paper, testing assumptions, verifying her reasoning, discarding possibilities that did not fit, and finding patterns in the most unexpected places. She paused occasionally, thinking deeply, then resumed with a subtle confidence that came from knowing her own abilities. It was quiet, methodical, almost mesmerizing to watch. The millionaire could feel his own pulse quicken slightly. He was not used to watching someone work through a challenge so effortlessly while maintaining such composure. There was a part of him that had assumed life and puzzles and even people would always respond in predictable ways. This encounter defied every expectation he had. He realized that he had underestimated her, but more than that, he realized that he had been intrigued by someone for no reason he could entirely explain. There was an authenticity about her, a natural brilliance that could not be bought or feigned. He decided to speak, not to interrupt her focus, but to acknowledge it. "I have to say, most people would have given up by now," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You're not only patient, but precise. That's rare." She looked up briefly, meeting his gaze with calm eyes. "I think a puzzle is only as hard as the way you look at it," she replied softly. "Sometimes the answer is in what people ignore." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. He felt a spark of admiration, a quiet respect that he hadn't felt for anyone in a long time. It was not just her intelligence, but the way she expressed it, the way she thought without arrogance, without need for recognition, that impressed him deeply. As she continued, the puzzle began to unfold under her careful reasoning. Step by step, she traced the connections, eliminated errors, and arrived at a solution that was elegant in its simplicity yet precise in its logic. He watched, almost unable to believe how effortlessly she had arrived there. His usual composure slipped for a brief moment, and he felt the rare flush of astonishment. Finally, she leaned back slightly, her eyes meeting his once more. "I think I've got it," she said, explaining the answer calmly, clearly, and confidently. She outlined her reasoning in a way that left no doubt. Every step made sense, every conclusion logical. He nodded slowly, taking in the result, aware that this was one of the few times in his life he had been truly surprised. For a moment, silence hung in the air, heavy but not uncomfortable. The other customers had gone back to their own routines, unaware of the quiet tension, the quiet victory, that had just occurred. He felt a deep respect rising within him, a rare feeling that he usually reserved for great achievements in business or extraordinary talent he encountered elsewhere. This was different. This was human. This was real. He finally spoke, his voice calm but touched with genuine admiration. "I must admit, I did not expect you to solve it so quickly. You think clearly, patiently, and without distraction. It is impressive." She smiled, modest but pleased, not seeking praise, just satisfied that the puzzle had been solved correctly. "Thank you. I just try to think things through," she said simply. There was a moment of quiet understanding between them, a recognition that went beyond words. He realized that intelligence, focus, and patience were not measured by status, wealth, or background, but by character, determination, and clarity of thought. She realized that her abilities, often unnoticed in her daily life, could stand out when truly tested. The millionaire felt a subtle shift within himself. He had entered the cafe expecting a brief distraction, a playful challenge, and yet here he was, genuinely intrigued and impressed by someone who had shown him a side of intelligence he rarely encountered. She had not only solved the puzzle but had done so with grace, humility, and quiet confidence. As she returned to her work, moving between tables with the same attentive care as before, he remained seated, reflecting on the unexpected encounter. For him, it was a rare moment of connection, a glimpse of something genuine in a world that often felt superficial. For her, it was a confirmation of her own skills, a reminder that patience, thoughtfulness, and quiet determination could make a difference in ways that money or status never could. And so the morning continued. The cafe buzzed with life, sunlight shifted across the floor, and people came and went. But in that small corner, between a millionaire and a humble, hard-working waitress, something remarkable had unfolded. A challenge had been issued, a puzzle solved, and in the process, a connection had been quietly formed. One that neither of them fully understood yet, but which promised to carry meaning far beyond the ordinary. The air in the cafe had changed. What had started as a normal morning had transformed into something rare, something that made ordinary moments feel charged with possibility. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, quietly observing the waitress as she moved gracefully between tables, refilling coffee cups, taking orders, and offering a warm smile to every customer. There was an ease in her movements, a quiet confidence that made him realize she was not just efficient. She was in complete command of her world, small as it might seem to others. He had issued a puzzle to her, one that had stumped many before. But she had solved it quickly, methodically, with no hesitation, and now the true impact of that moment began to sink in. He felt a strange mix of admiration and surprise, emotions he rarely allowed himself to experience in public. Most of his life had been spent surrounded by people who nodded and agreed with him, who rarely challenged him or showed any unexpected brilliance. This encounter was different. She was not trying to impress him, not seeking attention, and yet she had done something that commanded it. He leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table, feeling a spark of curiosity that he had not felt in years. He decided to engage her further, not as a test or a challenge, but as a way to understand the mind behind the calm composure. He caught her attention as she returned to the counter with an empty tray. "May I?" he asked, holding up a small notebook. It was worn, filled with notes, diagrams, and puzzles he had collected over the years. "I have something I've never shown anyone. It's tricky more than the last one. Would you like to try?" She looked at him with the same calm curiosity she had shown before. "I don't mind trying," she said, her voice steady and unshaken. He handed her the notebook, careful not to spill the coffee he had just finished. She opened it gently, flipping through the pages until she found the puzzle he had marked. It was intricate, a puzzle that required careful reasoning, attention to detail, and patience. Most people would have stared at it for hours, frustrated and uncertain. She, however, did not falter. Her eyes scanned the patterns, her mind sorting possibilities, discarding dead ends, following the threads of logic that led toward the solution. He watched her silently, fascinated. It was not just her ability to solve puzzles that impressed him, but the way she approached them, calm, precise, and without any rush. She did not overthink, did not second-guess herself, and did not appear anxious about the result. There was a quiet assurance in her method, a trust in her own reasoning that few people possessed. Minutes passed, though it was hard to measure time in that quiet bubble of focus. Around them, the cafe continued as normal. Patrons chatted softly, baristas called out orders, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Yet, for the millionaire, the world had narrowed to this single moment, this single person, this single puzzle. He realized that he was more invested in this than he had expected. He was witnessing not just intelligence but character. He was seeing a person who combined patience, focus, and humility in a way that was rare and deeply compelling. She paused for a moment, tapping her pencil lightly on the table, thinking carefully. Then, with a small smile, she began to explain her reasoning. Step by step, she walked through the puzzle, laying out the logic with clarity and precision. Each point was simple yet elegant. Each deduction was obvious only in hindsight, the kind of insight that makes people shake their heads in amazement. The millionaire felt a jolt of astonishment. She was solving the puzzle faster than he had anticipated, faster than he thought anyone could. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of disbelief crossing his usually composed face. He had expected hesitation, perhaps even failure, but certainly not this effortless mastery. The cafe seemed to hold its breath, though no one else could feel it. The energy between them was quiet but electric, the kind of tension that arises when two people recognize something extraordinary in one another. He realized that he had never encountered anyone like this before, someone who combined intellect, calmness, and humility so naturally. It was both humbling and inspiring, and he could not look away. She finished her explanation, and he studied the notebook, checking each step carefully. It was perfect. Every conclusion she had drawn was correct, every calculation accurate, every assumption logical. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath, feeling a rare sense of awe. "Remarkable," he said finally, his voice quieter than usual, almost reverent. "I have never seen anyone solve that so quickly. You are extraordinary." She smiled, modest and unassuming. "It's just a matter of thinking carefully," she said simply. I don't know that it's extraordinary. I just take my time and look closely. Her humility only made his admiration grow. He realized that brilliance without pride, skill without arrogance, was far more rare and valuable than any display of wealth or status. He had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted to impress him or gain favor, but here was someone who impressed him without trying, simply by being herself and trusting her own abilities. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep curiosity, not about business, not about deals, not about power, but about her. He wanted to know how she thought, what had shaped her, what experiences had led her to develop such calm confidence and sharp reasoning. There was something compelling about her presence, something that made him feel as though he had discovered a hidden depth in a world that often seemed shallow and predictable. She returned to her work after placing the notebook back on the counter. She moved gracefully, serving other customers, smiling and chatting politely, but he could not take his eyes off her. Every gesture seemed purposeful yet natural. Every movement seemed efficient yet graceful. He noticed the small things, the way she remembered the little preferences of regular customers, the way she adjusted her steps to avoid spilling drinks, the quiet way she handled unexpected situations without stress. He realized that her intelligence was not limited to puzzles. It extended to life itself, to problem-solving, to empathy, to awareness. She had a rare ability to navigate the world with precision and care, qualities that he found profoundly impressive. It made him reflect on his own life, on the people he interacted with, and on the ways in which true talent and skill often go unnoticed in ordinary settings. After a few moments, he spoke again, this time more softly, almost as if sharing a personal observation rather than making a comment. I think you may be the smartest person I have met in a long time, he said. Not just because you solve puzzles, but because of the way you approach things. Calm, thoughtful, patient. It's a rare combination. She paused, considering his words, then smiled politely. Thank you. I try to do my best, whatever I'm doing, she replied. Her voice carried no arrogance, no expectation of praise, only sincerity. He felt a rare warmth in his chest, a recognition of something genuine in the world, something that money or power could not create. For him, it was a small revelation, a reminder that intelligence, patience, and humility could be more remarkable than wealth or influence. For her, it was a quiet affirmation of her own abilities, a subtle acknowledgement that her careful, thoughtful approach to life could indeed make a difference. He continued to watch her for a while longer, fascinated by the way she moved through the cafe with quiet authority, commanding respect without demanding it. There was a rhythm to her actions, a balance between efficiency and grace, that made him realize just how rare true skill and intelligence could be. He began to understand that this simple encounter, a puzzle and a solved challenge, had opened a window into something much deeper: the value of observation, patience, and understanding. The morning wore on, and the cafe grew busier. New customers arrived, filling tables, chatting, and ordering food. The waitress handled everything with her usual calm, efficient manner. Yet the millionaire could not stop thinking about the way she had solved the puzzle, the quiet intelligence that had guided her, and the subtle confidence that had made her stand out without trying. He realized that he wanted to know more about her. Not just about her mind, but about her life, her experiences, her ambitions, and her character. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that drew him in and made him want to see beyond the ordinary facade of everyday life. She had challenged his assumptions, surprised him, and made him see that brilliance could be found in unexpected places, often unnoticed by the world. And so the cafe continued its rhythm, the sunlight shifting across the floor, the aroma of coffee lingering in the air, and the ordinary moments carrying an extraordinary weight. Between a millionaire and a humble, hard-working waitress, a quiet but profound connection had formed. A challenge had been issued, a puzzle solved, and in the process, a bridge had been built. A bridge of curiosity, admiration, and respect. Neither of them knew exactly what would come next, but both could feel that something meaningful had begun. He had been astonished, impressed, and humbled. She had been affirmed, challenged, and recognized in a way that few people had ever done. And in the quiet hum of the cafe, life had shifted, if only slightly, in a way that would carry meaning far beyond that morning. The cafe had settled into a comfortable rhythm again, but the atmosphere around the table where the millionaire had been sitting felt different now. It wasn't just the usual quiet curiosity of a customer observing the staff. There was something more subtle and compelling in the air, a tension mixed with admiration and intrigue. The millionaire, usually composed and self-assured, found himself watching the waitress with genuine interest. Not in the casual way people watch a performer, but in the quiet way one studies something rare and precious. He had watched her solve puzzles, and he had been astonished, but now he was curious about the person behind that intelligence. Her focus, her patience, her humility. These were qualities that could not be taught, could not be bought, and yet here she was, displaying them effortlessly. He realized that he had never taken the time to really notice people in this way before. Most of his interactions were transactional or superficial, yet here, he found himself drawn into a conversation that could lead somewhere meaningful. As she moved past his table to refill a customer's cup, he stood and called her gently. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" he asked. His voice carried authority, yes, but also an unexpected warmth. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. She looked up, slightly surprised, but nodded politely. "Of course," she replied, setting the cup down and approaching him. Her expression was calm, open, but there was a quiet awareness in her eyes, as if she already sensed that this conversation might be different from any she had had before. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Please sit," he said. She hesitated only for a moment, then took the seat, keeping her posture straight but relaxed. The notebook with the puzzle still lay on the counter, a silent reminder of what had just passed between them. "I have to admit," he began, "I rarely meet people who surprise me. Most people either want something from me or are intimidated by me. But you solved the puzzle not just quickly, but with clarity, patience, and thoughtfulness. It's rare to see that." She smiled faintly, modestly. "I just try to think carefully. I don't know that it's rare. I've always liked figuring things out. That's all." Her humility only deepened his respect. He leaned back slightly, studying her more closely. "It's more than just intelligence," he said softly. "It's the way you approach challenges, the way you remain calm and focused, and the way you don't seek attention for what you accomplish. That combination, it's unusual." She looked down briefly, considering his words. "I've learned over time that worrying about impressing others doesn't help. It's better to focus on what you can do and do it well," she said. Her tone was quiet, thoughtful, but there was strength in it. He nodded slowly, impressed not only by what she said but by how she said it. "I can see that," he replied. "Most people could learn a lot from your approach, myself included." There was a pause, a moment of silence that felt significant. Around them, the cafe continued its rhythm, but in that small space, a quiet connection was forming. "I'm curious," he continued after a while, "about how someone like you sees the world. Most people in your position don't get noticed. They work hard, often quietly, and yet the world rarely acknowledges them. How do you stay motivated?" She considered his question carefully, her fingers resting lightly on the table. "I've learned that life is about small victories," she said. "It's not about recognition or applause. It's about doing your best, helping where you can, and keeping your head up even when things are hard. The rest, it comes when it comes." He was struck by her perspective. It was grounded, practical, and yet wise beyond what most people of her age might express. "That's impressive," he said softly. "You have a clarity that many people, even those with wealth and experience, don't seem to have. You see things clearly, without getting distracted by what others think or by unnecessary worry." She smiled again, a small, genuine smile that carried warmth without arrogance. "I guess you could say I've had to figure things out for myself. Life doesn't wait for anyone, and it doesn't always make things easy." He nodded, absorbing her words. There was an authenticity to her that was rare, and he realized that this conversation was more than curiosity. It was a recognition of someone exceptional. He had spent years surrounded by people who were polite, agreeable, or ambitious, but few had the combination of intelligence, humility, and quiet strength that she displayed naturally. "I'd like to know more about you," he said finally. "Not about puzzles, not about work, but about you. Your ambitions, your challenges, your dreams. People like you often have stories that the world never hears. I'd like to hear yours, if you're willing to share." Her eyes met his, calm and steady. There was no hesitation, no pretension, only a quiet thoughtfulness. "I've had my share of challenges," she said softly. "Life hasn't been easy. I work hard because I have to, and I've learned to make the most of what I have. As for dreams, I try not to lose sight of them, even if they seem far away. I hope one day I can do something meaningful with what I've learned." He listened carefully, moved not just by her words but by the tone, the depth, the quiet conviction. There was no bitterness, no complaint, only honesty and a desire to do well despite the circumstances. He felt a profound respect growing within him, a recognition that he had encountered someone truly remarkable in the most ordinary setting imaginable. "You've thought about this carefully," he said, his voice low, almost in awe. "And you approach life with a kind of balance that most people spend years trying to achieve. It's extraordinary. I don't use that word lightly, but in your case it fits." She shook her head gently. "I don't feel extraordinary," she said. "I just do what I can. Life teaches you things and you adapt. That's all." Her simplicity, her refusal to overstate herself, made his admiration grow even more. He realized that brilliance did not need to be loud, and strength did not need to be aggressive. Could be quiet, humble, and effective. She embodied that, and it left him reflecting on his own life, on the way he measured value, success, and talent. They talked for a while longer about life, about work, about challenges and ambitions. He asked questions, genuinely curious, and she answered honestly, without embellishment or expectation. There was a rhythm to the conversation, a flow that made each exchange feel natural, meaningful, and rare. The cafe, with its ordinary morning noises, seemed to fade into the background. He found himself laughing quietly at her dry observations about the world, and she smiled at his subtle humor, a small acknowledgement of the human connection forming between them. It was neither friendship nor anything yet, but it was a recognition, a sense that this encounter mattered, that it had significance beyond the ordinary. Finally, he leaned back, looking at her with a thoughtful expression. "I have met many people, and I have seen many kinds of talent," he said. "But I rarely encounter someone who surprises me in this way. You've done that not just with the puzzle but with everything you've shared. You think clearly, you work hard, and you approach life with integrity. That's remarkable." She smiled faintly, still modest, still quiet. "I appreciate that," she said. "It means a lot to hear it, but I just try to keep doing my best." He nodded, feeling a warmth he hadn't expected. "There's something I want to offer you," he said slowly. "Not as charity, not as a favor, but as an opportunity. I see potential in you, something rare, and I think it deserves to be nurtured. I'd like to help you in whatever way I can, if you're open to it." Her eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and caution appearing on her face. She was not used to this level of attention, this kind of offer, and yet she sensed its sincerity. I don't know what to say," she replied softly. "Say yes," he said gently, smiling. "Or say no. But know that this is genuine. I've met few people like you, and I believe that with support, guidance, and the right opportunities, you could do something extraordinary." She paused, looking down at her hands briefly before meeting his gaze again. There was thoughtfulness in her eyes, weighing the offer, the risk, the possibility. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I'd like to try," she said quietly. "I want to see where this could go." He smiled, a rare, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "Good. That's all I needed to hear. We'll figure it out together, step by step." The moment felt significant, profound, and full of quiet promise. Around them, the cafe continued its rhythm, but for the two of them, the ordinary morning had become extraordinary. A puzzle had been solved, a connection had been formed, and a life-changing opportunity had been quietly set into motion. In that small, sunlit cafe, between a millionaire and a humble, hard-working waitress, something remarkable was unfolding. Not through wealth or power, but through intelligence, humility, and human connection. A door had been opened, one that neither of them had anticipated, and the possibilities stretched out before them, quietly, patiently, like the next puzzle waiting to be solved. The cafe was quieter now as the morning gave way to the early afternoon. The sunlight had shifted, spilling across the polished wooden floor and highlighting the small details that usually went unnoticed. The steam rising gently from coffee cups, the faint aroma of freshly baked bread, and the soft hum of conversations around tables. For most people it was an ordinary day, but for the millionaire and the waitress it was anything but ordinary. The moments they had shared, from puzzles to conversation, had created a connection that neither could ignore. He watched her move among the tables with the same quiet efficiency he had noticed before, her attention to detail evident in every gesture. And yet, today there was a subtle change in her demeanor, a light in her eyes that wasn't there before. A mix of curiosity, awareness, and anticipation. She sensed, even without words, that something significant was about to happen. He gestured for her to join him at his table, and she approached, a polite but tentative smile on her face. He handed her a small notebook, the same one with the puzzles, and then closed it gently, setting it aside. "We don't need this today," he said softly. "I want to talk about something more important than puzzles. Something about life, potential, and the choices we make when an opportunity presents itself." She nodded, unsure what he meant but willing to listen. She had already learned that his words carried weight and that he saw things most people overlooked. She trusted that there was sincerity in his voice, a genuine interest in her as a person rather than as a worker or a performer. "I've spent a long time observing people," he began, leaning back slightly in his chair, "and I've realized something. True talent, intelligence, and strength are often found in places where the world doesn't expect them. Most people look for it in schools, in offices, in fancy titles. But real ability, real character, shows itself in ordinary moments, in everyday life, and in the choices people make when no one is watching." She listened carefully, her hands folded lightly on the table, her expression calm but attentive. There was a weight to his words, a seriousness that made her realize this was not just casual conversation. "You've shown me that," he continued, "not just with puzzles, but with the way you carry yourself, the way you handle challenges, the way you think. I want to offer you an opportunity, one that could change the course of your life if you choose to take it. It's not charity. It's not a favor. It's a chance to use your abilities in ways that could truly make a difference for yourself and for others." Her eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise, caution, and curiosity. "An opportunity?" she repeated softly. I don't know if I deserve that." He smiled gently. "Deserving it has nothing to do with it. This is about recognizing potential and giving it room to grow. I've met many people who are talented, but few who combine talent with patience, clarity, and humility. You are one of them, and I want to help you take the next step, whatever that may look like." She took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Her life had always been about hard work, about making the most of what she had, about quietly doing her best without expecting recognition. She had dreamed, yes, but her dreams had always seemed distant, almost unreachable. And now, here was someone offering not just encouragement, but a tangible opportunity to pursue them. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked carefully, her voice steady but her heart racing. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity. "It could be mentorship, guidance, investment in a project you've been thinking about, or even a chance to develop a career in an area you are passionate about. I want to support you, not just financially, but by sharing experience, resources, and connections that could help you grow. The specifics can be decided together, but the essence is simple. I believe in your potential, and I want to help it flourish." She paused, letting his words sink in. It was overwhelming, yes, but not in a way that paralyzed her. Instead, it made her reflect on all the small steps she had taken in her life, the effort, the perseverance, and the quiet determination that had brought her to this moment. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment she had pushed herself to think carefully and act responsibly, they had led her here. And now, she was being given a chance to step into a future she had only dared to imagine. I don't know what to say, she admitted finally. I've worked hard, yes, but I never thought someone like you would notice me. Not in this way. I'm grateful and I want to try, but it's a lot to take in. He nodded, understanding her hesitation. I know it's unexpected. That's why I'm not asking for a decision right now. Take your time. Think about what you want, what you're ready for, and how you want to move forward. But know this. The offer is genuine, and it's yours if you choose to accept it. She considered his words, looking down at her hands for a moment before meeting his gaze again. There was something about his sincerity, his patience, and the respect in his tone that made her feel safe. This wasn't a test, a trap, or an attempt to impress. It was real and it was rare. I think I'd like to try, she said slowly, her voice quiet but firm. I want to see where this could go, and I want to do my best. I want to learn, to grow, and to make the most of the opportunity you're offering. A smile spread across his face, warm and genuine. A rare, unguarded expression that he reserved for moments of true connection. That's all I needed to hear, he said softly. We'll figure it out together, step by step. You won't be alone in this. And I promise, we'll make sure your talents and efforts are recognized in ways that truly matter. For a moment, they sat in quiet reflection, the weight of the moment settling between them. Around them, the cafe continued as usual, the sounds of conversation and clinking cups filling the air. But for the two of them, time seemed to pause. It was not a dramatic moment with grand gestures, but a quiet affirmation of potential, trust, and the power of human connection. She felt a mix of excitement, relief, and determination. She had always believed that hard work and careful thought mattered, even if the world didn't notice. Now, she saw that those qualities could open doors she had never imagined. And for him, this encounter had reminded him of the value of seeing people for who they truly are, beyond appearances and expectations, and of the difference one person could make by recognizing potential and offering guidance. Over the next few weeks, the two of them began working together in small, careful steps. The millionaire introduced her to people who could help develop her skills, offered advice on projects she had been considering, and provided support that went far beyond finances. He respected her pace, never pushing too hard, but always encouraging growth, reflection, and exploration. She discovered new confidence within herself. The quiet intelligence and patience that had guided her through life now had a platform, a space where it could be applied to greater challenges. She learned to trust her own judgment even more, knowing that someone who had seen her abilities and respected them was walking alongside her. Each success, each small breakthrough, reinforced the connection they had formed that morning in the cafe. And as time passed, the respect and admiration between them grew deeper. He admired her humility, her determination, and her focus, while she appreciated his patience, guidance, and genuine interest in her growth. What had begun with a simple puzzle had evolved into something far more meaningful, a partnership grounded in trust, mutual respect, and the recognition of true potential. One morning, several months later, they returned to the same cafe where it all began. The sunlight fell through the windows in the same golden patterns, and the familiar aroma of coffee and bread filled the air. She moved among the tables, serving customers with the same efficiency and warmth. But now there was an added confidence in her posture, a sense that she had stepped into a new chapter of her life. He watched her for a moment, smiling quietly to himself. The journey they had taken together had been gradual, thoughtful, and deliberate, but it had transformed not just her life, but his perspective as well. He had learned that true talent could exist anywhere, that humility and intelligence often came together in unexpected ways, and that offering guidance, support, and opportunity could create extraordinary outcomes. When she approached his table, he gestured for her to sit. It's amazing to see how far you've come, he said softly. Not just in what you've achieved, but in the way you carry yourself, the confidence you've gained, and the clarity with which you make decisions. I knew you had potential, but seeing it unfold has been extraordinary. She smiled, a quiet, satisfied smile. I couldn't have done it without your guidance, she admitted. You gave me a chance when no one else did, and you trusted me. That made all the difference. He shook his head gently. No, you did this yourself. I only helped open the door. You walked through it with patience, intelligence, and determination. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it lasting. For a long moment, they simply sat there, two people connected by a shared journey, by recognition, respect, and the quiet power of opportunity. Around them, the cafe continued, oblivious to the extraordinary story unfolding within its walls. A puzzle had led to connection, connection had led to opportunity, and opportunity had led to growth, transformation, and hope. And in that ordinary cafe, under ordinary sunlight, a quiet miracle had taken place. The life of a hardworking waitress had changed forever, not because of luck, but because her talent had been recognized, nurtured, and given room to flourish. And the millionaire, who had expected only a momentary amusement, had discovered something equally valuable. The rare joy of seeing potential realized, and the profound impact of truly seeing someone for who they are. In the end, it was not puzzles or wealth or chance that had mattered. It was understanding, respect, patience, and the courage to offer opportunity where it was deserved. And that, more than anything else, had changed both of their lives.